allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Public correspondence.
So the only public correspondence that we received was in 2 Facebook comments, which we have decided is not something we would like to do, because we don't have the capacity to really follow up on them. So we do need to set the settings on every single post to not have comments, so
Okay.
you and I can discuss that.
All right,
Yeah.
how we do that so there's no comments
Yeah.
allowed within Facebook.
Yeah, and then we'll continue. I thought it might be a good idea if everyone agrees for me to just repost my email address for correspondence on the Facebook page
Mhm.
every month or so, just to say, hey, if we want to hear from you, please email here.
And we'll say that to the camera.
Yeah.
There is an email address, it can be found on Facebook.
Yeah.
Or it can be found on the Cheshire School site, and it's Sarah's email. And if you have any input to the committee,
I love to get
that's the place to
messages.
send it.
Does it make sense to maybe periodically, whether it's weekly, monthly, on the community forum, to do the same thing, make an announcement, hey, by the way, we've got this page, and if you have comments, we don't allow them there, but
You can email me here, or you can join the page for updates. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And I don't know how many, I think we have like 115 followers
Yeah.
or something on Facebook.
It's expanded from
But the forum's got thousands.
Yeah.
number
Okay.
1 top fan.
Approval of minutes, March 23rd, 2023. Do we have a motion? Dennis, second?
I'll second.
Greg? Any discussion? If not, then all those in favor? Unanimous. Minutes of meeting of March 30th, 2023.
I'll move to approve.
Greg? Second?
I'll second.
Chris? Any discussion?
Very thorough.
We're trying to get an in-between amount. Ron and I have gone back and forth. How much should we say and how much is too much? So we've gone back and forth with a little bit. As we go farther on, we're gonna wanna make sure we have a record of things that we do. But we're still working on
Yeah,
that.
no issue.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Then all those in favor? And unanimous. Very good. We have no invoices, so we're moving right along. We're not spending any money. Keep it. Chairman's report, just a few very quick points.
Bargain basement rate.
Which I'm sure the architects are gonna discuss. We had a fairly extensive Zoom meeting with myself, the architects, Jeff Sullivan, Vince, can't remember who else was there, but it was about an hour and a half meeting and talking about setting up a working group within the school system that would help coordinate a lot of the meetings that are gonna take place. And you'll hear much more about that as we get going. Again, I'm sure our architects will fill us in, but they came in on April 4th and did a visitation to each of the 3 schools, Norton, Darcy, and Chapman, and I went along with them, and it was very valuable. We walked through the buildings, talked to the principals extensively, talked to a few of the teachers. I spent a fair amount of time, particularly at Darcy, since that's a unique program that we really can't just cookie cutter design. So, and again, I'm sure they'll fill you in much more on that. I did a report on Tuesday, this has been a busy week, on Tuesday to the town council. Started off by telling them how wonderfully this committee is working and how much time and effort you've all put in, how well we work together as a team, and they wanted me to make sure that I came back to you, let you know how appreciative they are of all of your efforts. Talked a little bit about where the architects are right now. I shared that big graphic that we had looked at one of our previous meetings, which laid out the different design phases and some of the meetings that were looking at community meetings, meetings with the Board of Ed and Town Council, meetings with various school staff, and all of the other things that go in there, state and everything else. And that was a very good conversation. And then I filled them in on our schedule in terms of interviewing and hopefully filling the owner's rep position, and see them and where they are with that. And then just let them know also of a couple of the workshops that we've done with Dr. Solon going through ed specs and with Attorney D'Onofrio going through and that was it. And with that said, I'm going to get a lead.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Again, Justin Hopkins, project manager. We have,
Jeff Wazinski, principal.
Antonia Ciavarella, architectural designer.
we'll all be on a first name basis shortly. So this is kind of a typical summary that we're preparing for the building committee meetings. We like to keep it to 1 to 2 pages just to give the broad overview where we go over work completed since our last meeting, work in progress, work that's currently underway, some of our meetings held and some of our next steps and takeaways, as well as any attachments. So what I'd like to do is just kind of go through the high level items, and if we need to get into the attachments, we certainly can. So under work completed, as the chair mentioned, we held our existing building walkthrough last Tuesday. We do have a summary presentation that Antonia would be happy to go through if there are any questions, just to give a high level of some of our findings. Our civil engineer has also had the wetlands delineation for both Norton and North End, so that work is completed. That will be inputted into the site surveys that are currently ongoing. So right now, the site survey crew is at Norton, anticipated to be complete by the end of next week, the 21st. North End, anticipated start date beginning of May, approximately 10 working days for them to be in the field. We have met, as was mentioned previously, to discuss our project meeting schedule, including the development of participant list, who's going to be part of the core group of staff and administrators and teachers and committee members to hold our bi-weekly core working group meetings. We're applying the BOE updates, periodic updates, as well as some of our public forums, or what we're calling community conversations. And that is, we do have a schedule that we've identified some dates. There are some TBDs that are there specifically for some of the public sessions as we're trying to work through the appropriate dates. I did place a call to Barbara Fabiani at OSCGNR, who was the PM there, who was working with the district to develop the grant application. It does appear that she will be assigned as the project manager moving forward for OSCGNR. So we've worked on a number of projects with her and have a good working relationship. So, she has my cell phone. She texts me often. We are also digging into the educational specifications, anticipating our core working group meeting number 2, which is April 25th. So we're understanding that there has been a lot of work that went into those ed specs. We're developing some questions, some areas of focus to kind of dig deeper into some of those items. So that's work that we're doing to prepare for that meeting in 2 weeks.
Will that be during the day meeting, or will that be in conjunction with this committee meeting?
So that is scheduled for a core working group meeting, which we have, I believe it's late in the afternoon on our Thursdays. We've identified Thursdays, 3 to 4:30 for
Tuesdays.
Tuesdays.
The first
sorry.
one was
Yeah.
Thursday, I think then after
Yeah.
that it was Tuesday.
Yeah.
And that's 3 to 4:30. Those are all Zoom?
Yeah,
Yes.
Google Meets, I think the superintendent had set them up.
The reason I ask, and this may be way premature, when I first saw the ed specs and I looked at them, I had some questions from my background. So when it comes time, there may be things that are etched in stone, there may be things that you guys have mentioned, that there's you know, there are things that you may look at that may not make sense or may need to be changed for one reason or another, a code change or whatever. Just make a note, mental note, I've got 2 cents to throw out that will be worthless, but if we're talking about it and there's an opportunity to ask questions, I have a couple.
Well, I'm assuming that as you come every 2 weeks to this particular group and let us know where we're at in the process, that you would also have an opportunity for input there.
Yeah, and if there, I guess if there's other questions and you wanna funnel them through the chair, we'd be happy to kind of keep that comprehensive list so it doesn't get
Yeah.
lost. That's fine too, and we can report back, you know, to this committee
Yep.
what our findings are or what, you know.
So I just email them to you and
Okay,
then?
that would be fine if you want to do that. Yeah.
That way they'll be all on one list. you know.
I may have, a while ago, I'll dig up, but I wrote something down to somebody.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah,
That's
but you
fine,
come at it
that's
with
fine.
from a different perspective.
That's what I was saying, you know, and I might be touching on things that can't be touched, but at least let me ask the question and we'll see. But maybe there is,
Right.
I thought there were a couple things that just didn't seem feasible from my point of view.
In the electrical field, or
Um,
it could be in anything?
Electrical and something else in fire protection. And I'm not trying, I want to be sensitive to the people who put in all the hard work. I don't want to say something's wrong or insult the hard work, but I just, there's a couple of approaches that I maybe didn't understand the way it was written down, maybe the way I read it, I didn't understand the whole spirit or the intent behind it, and it didn't just, I couldn't put grasp on why this, this seems odd,
Yep.
so.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to raise questions.
Yep, now's the time.
Yeah, and, you know, the meeting that we're going to have to go through those, we're gonna be asking similar questions just to kind of understand and validate some of the items that have been brought up. So having that information prior to that meeting would be beneficial. Okay.
You might wanna change some of the dates. I don't think you're gonna find a lot of people in town December 26th.
I thought that was the 28th, but yeah,
Same thing with the 28th.
That's on
I-
your
I-
published,
yeah, I
meeting
think that's
calendar,
your
so
meeting.
why I put those in. Yeah, I admittedly, so you'll see,
I just said to my calendar, book in the 2nd and 4th of
That's-
forever.
so this,
How did you even find that?
20,
those are, published dates for, at least for your committee. And then, the core working group, the invite, I was just following the invite every
Yeah,
2 weeks,
no,
but
yeah.
you'll see,
We have plenty
actually,
of time to change it.
yeah,
We may need to have a conversation.
You might not have a quorum either.
What we're doing for Christmas.
right, yeah, there's definitely some dates there.
Yeah.
Just one other thing on this while we're talking about this, you'll see some open, on page 3, you'll see some open ones for the working group. And that's because we anticipate some of the other meetings will be either pushed, canceled, moved for some reason or another. So there's, please treat this as a living document. What we wanna do is, you know, the meetings that we had will eventually turn gray, and this will just be a master document, so it's a good kind of chronological timekeeper for us, you know?
Just a quick question on what we talked about a moment ago. So if I do have, if anybody in the committee has something, the route to get it to you is send it to Rich and have Rich then filter it, or?
I think in general, you know, you don't want people to be
Bombarded.
getting bombarded from different places. And so in general, I think it's a wise point to send it to someone, and the chairman makes sense, and then let me funnel it out and then.
So right now, you'll be the gatekeeper, point of contact, liaison,
Yeah,
however you want.
and if there's, you know, something where you need to talk directly, that's fine. You're gonna see them on a regular basis, and that's fine. I don't wanna block communication in any way, but I also don't want to have them spending a lot of time responding to various things, since they're gonna be juggling as it is, the whole school staff and community and everything else.
Yeah, and that's what just occurred to me, that's why I wanted to just bring that up, so, okay.
Okay, great.
Sorry to keep interrupting.
No, it's all right. In terms of the meetings held, I think we've mostly spoken about the first two. We did have that kickoff review meeting to start establishing the workflows. We did have our existing school tours, and yesterday we met to narrow down the working group participants as well as land on especially the upcoming 2 meetings that we're going to have. In terms of next steps for us, we need to finalize the dates for our public sessions, the think tank and the community conversations. We need to schedule a prep session with the state. That would likely be more beneficial once you get your OPM on board, so that we can all be part of a project team. And I believe you're interviewing CMs in 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Yep. So once those are all on board, maybe a good time to schedule that. But the key is, it's been our experience, you can't call up the state and say, can we meet next week? Typically, you're scheduling meetings a month out
Right.
in order to get in front of them.
Yeah, we'll be going to the town council, it's the second Tuesday of May, for both the OPM and the CM. So hopefully everyone will be on board very quickly after that.
Okay, great.
Because technically, we make a recommendation to the town council.
Right. We're also intending to be finalizing our site due diligence, as I mentioned, the surveys that are ongoing at Norton and upcoming at North End. And along with that is preparation of design options for each site. Some of the attachments that we have, reference those. We do have the summary of our walkthrough of existing schools. Antonia, maybe if you just wanted to give the high level.
Sure. So the high level is on the back of the first page at the top. We have just a summary of each of the 3 schools, and then we go into more detail for each of these 3 schools in terms of site for parking, site for play, building exterior, and building interior. But some of the key things that we found at Norton, we heard site circulation was a major point of concern. They had parents that would park in the church parking lot across the street to avoid the congestion that happens at pickup and drop off. We also saw, we were there for when the buses were dropping off students in the morning, and what we observed was there was a route for buses and parent exit that overlapped each other. So really thinking about separating the parent and bus drop off was key there. Norton also has a memorial garden that would want to be maintained. It's kind of in the back near where the site is for the new school. And then we heard that there are various pedestrian access points coming from a few areas on the site. So thinking about how students are coming to school and what that informs in terms of us laying out initial site design concepts. At Chapman, accessibility for students and facilities was key. There were some spaces that were only accessible by stairs, and then we saw, actually, as we were there, they were moving some risers from a lower level to a main level, and they had to take them outside of the building in order to bring them back in to make that transition. So thinking about accessibility, and also providing flexibility in terms of the floor plans. They're thinking about shifting some program areas because they have, for example, the media center also serves as a band and orchestra classroom, so you can imagine the acoustical challenges there. So they're trying to figure out how to create some different spaces for those 2 programs. At Darcy, the shining, the whole school was beautiful, but exterior and interior actually were gorgeous. So recreating as best as possible the natural surroundings and the natural inspired playscapes, and in the interior, those core elements that are used throughout the day, every day for educational purposes, those modular elements, recreating as best as possible those elements to foster the environment that they have there currently. Big picture common findings, focus on special education, really creating the dedicated spaces that are needed for intervention, small group, flexible, adaptable, 21st century learning environments, mobile furniture, thinking about reconfigurable spaces, thinking about the possibility of defronting the classroom and technology interventions. Then finally, celebrating each student through welcoming them into the school. We saw, especially at Chapman, lots of murals, lots of nature-inspired wayfinding graphics to welcome them. So bringing those elements that exist at each school and celebrating each student in their new homes. So that's the high-level summary. Happy to
Yeah, no, it was fantastic to have, but basically 3/4 of a day with,
Yeah.
principal, superintendent to walk through these buildings. And, we were after not only observing, the operations and how things work, but also the culture and understanding kind of what's important to them. So there's a lot of that detail in this that I think was, we talked about, it was important to kind of milestone it. So you kind of have to know where you're coming from in order to know where you want to head. And I thought, for our team, it was eye-opening for us to understand a lot of the intricacies of the various different program elements. So, it was a day well spent. So, we appreciate it, and this document is the kind of milestone. So,
No, I think what was really valuable to us, as Richard mentioned, was the visit to Darcy School. A lot of the facilities related things that we saw in Norton and Chapman are things that we see every day when we work with other districts, utilizing, embargoing classroom size spaces for special education and OTPT, speech and language, basically moving into infrastructure that wasn't necessarily built for it in the first place. So those were some kind of common findings that I think Cheshire is not unique in tackling 21st century learning environments. The real important thing was Darcy and seeing that early education, the birth to preschool, and how they really have kind of, has everybody been to those classrooms here?
I don't know if everyone has. I've talked to Dr. Solon about possibly doing a field trip with the committee.
Yeah.
Because it is a very unique setting.
Yeah. And some of the kind of project-based or activity-based stuff that they have in those classrooms are pretty interesting. There's a water table in each, so we know that we need to try and incorporate some sort of flexible type of play there. The exterior, as Antonia had mentioned, the exterior playscapes are really an amenity to the town, so it was very worthwhile. Any other questions regarding this, our tours, or?
Now, the only thing I'd say is, as you're developing things like this, if you find that you have something that you think would be good for our Facebook page, if you just keep that in mind, so that we can begin to get more and more information out to the public.
Yeah, I'd love to share. And I'll just note anecdotally, my son, my middle son went to Darcy for kindergarten, and when I told him that school will eventually not be a school anymore, he said, "But what about the playground?"
Yeah.
So,
It is a unique place.
May I ask on the Facebook page, would you like still imagery, or are you posting videos as reels? What's your preferred?
I would prefer videos, ideally, but we'll take anything.
I mean, I put some we have very little on there right now, but in the past, we've done some slides and things along those lines.
Okay.
If we have multiple pages, it's easier if you do it as some kind of a slide or a
Yeah.
video.
Yeah, videos get great engagement, so, because they tend to propagate better in the feed, so.
You're gonna get pictures, you're gonna get stills from me once they start,
Good.
just so you know.
Yeah.
You don't like them?
No, we're gonna put them up.
You're gonna get a lot of wasted,
There's a lot of people out in the community that want to know what's going as we move along, so
Yeah, we owe it to them to show them what's happening.
no.
if we can build that up and let them know there's material coming.
On some of the right.
So one of the other things that we included as an attachment is our guide for working group meetings. So if you reference some of our projected core working group meetings, we've labeled them according to the topics to discuss, and this is more or less a summary of what we're going to be discussing at each meeting. So it goes from our kickoff meeting. We found the missing one.
I think that was
There it is.
Okay, so it goes from our kickoff meeting with all of the members of the group, the educational specification review, our visioning session where we discuss what's working, what can be improved, and that is also a consideration for some of our evidence-based design. We'll have an initial concept meeting, sustainable strategies, site improvements, safety and security, building systems and lighting, and interior design. So you'll notice these topics as we go from start to finish, go from blue sky to a little bit more granular as we get into the details.
So this is a similar document that we handed out at the last meeting. It's just an update to that document. We added some meetings to it, so again, this will be treated as a document as well.
And we already discussed our project work and meeting schedule, and we also have a think tank handout. And Toby, you want to
Sure.
do it? This is the fun stuff here.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with this one. So there's actually a video that accompanies this. It's a brief, I think, 2-minute, 30-second video set to music that you can, the faculty, staff, anybody that would like to participate in the think tank that can watch this video in advance. And it's meant to reset your headspace as you're approaching these conversations. We find that oftentimes it can be sometimes hard to think differently about what you've been living with. For so long, you've been making do with it. For so long, it's hard to break free of what you know and really think big picture, Greenfield, visionary, 20, 30 years out about what could be possible. So this is a prompt to invite people to think big about that. And yes, we want to also hear the daily challenges and the pain points. We definitely want to balance those foundational and aspirational goals. But this intent is to think big about your mission, vision, and story, and how the architecture itself can not only celebrate the students and the faculty and education, but maybe even a broader mission that the community might have.
Can I just add something real quick? Because I did watch the different versions of the video and the different music. I do have a music preference, but it's really good with the music as a, I imagine this is a teaser that we would send out to those 25 or 30 people that will be participating.
Yep.
So I thought I found it really fascinating, and I hope it works for us. I'm sure you've used this in the past, right?
Yes, yes. We also have a favorite soundtrack, so I hear you.
We'll talk.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so this is really going to work well, I think,
And
to
I do
start the
have that
process.
if the committee wants, I can forward it down to
Send us a link then.
Yeah. This is great.
Or hit play.
you. Or what?
Or pop it up there and
You want to play it now? If I could locate it quickly.
Sure.
From the working group meetings, is that something you'll have like a report, a written report on, kind of when you come back here at all of our meetings then?
Yes.
And that's the same 25 to 30 people throughout, or how is that group selected, I guess? Who's selecting them?
So discussions with Jeff, Superintendent Jeff,
Yep.
and Marlene and Vin,
Okay.
and Rich. So we're trying to establish a cross-section of the district so that we're not too administration heavy, getting some teacher input, some principal input, etc.
It's
And
district-wide of the schools, or is it just particular to the Norton and Chapman schools?
I
Well, the
think-
working group is different than the think tank. The working group is about a dozen people. It's Jeff Marlene, myself, Rich Gussenberg, the three principals. The principals are recommending 3 teachers to join us as part of the group, and Rich Clavette, our facilities director. And what we talked about, with Jeff is, as we need to invite different parties in, we would do that, but the purpose of the working group is try and get through the details of the work that needs to be accomplished, especially early stage around the educational review. The think tank, that's different, and those are, we envision 2 groups of about 25 people, one for the new North End and one for the Norton School. And that group would include not only administrators, teachers, but 2 board members, paraeducator, school nurse, somebody from the facilities. Jeff Solon thought that we should have 2 or 3 5th grade students as part of that, some parents. So that would be the broader group, and they would start with kind of this video, but then go on from there. And I don't know all the details of how the think tank is going to work. I mean, I saw the written materials. So those are just 2 different
So the core
topics
working group,
altogether.
those are the meetings that you're reporting back on here, that's only 12 people.
Yeah.
Or
Every 2 weeks.
Try this? See if this works.
What was your soundtrack?
This was it.
Okay.
That was the one you liked the music of?
Yes.
No.
What's that?
He sends
Curious,
those,
yeah.
yeah.
There's one that's
I'll
more
forward
minutes.
this to you when you are welcome.
More.
to see all of them. It's just a link at the very beginning of this email.
Justin, I have a question for you. And, you know,
This is not
not everybody necessarily knows, but
handling.
as you know, I'm on the tail end of things when it comes to working on a design on a project like this. And it just ingrained in me is, in 1 month, there better be CDs filing for permit. And the timeline for this is so great, it's tough for me to conceptualize. So I'm probably gonna ask this question a lot, but maybe it's a good thing. But how do you feel you are, even though you just started? Do you feel like things are moving according to the pace of information gathering that you need, and does it look like it's moving that way, or is it too early to tell, or do you think
No,
you're
I
getting the
think-
response you need to be on target so that, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've established a good working relationship, I think, already with the superintendent and his team. And I think if, you know, this was our original schedule that's on the back of our thing, we're right there, so.
Yeah, it's been great.
Just curious, because
Yeah.
there's, you know, even with those things, there might be some,
Yeah.
oh gosh, we had these meetings, but there were those 4 key people that couldn't be there, and, you know, because they were sick, or for whatever, you know, not because people are holding things up, but
Chris, I think it's a good question to ask every single time we meet.
Yeah.
Where are we with the schedule and what kind of problems you're running into?
You're still only getting 2 weeks.
I know. It's so difficult. A year and a half, like.
Yeah, no, I think the whole purpose of us spending a lot of time, and there's a lot of paper going around with all the meetings set up all the way to the end of December, it's important to map it out. We have a strategy to get from where we are today to a conclusion. There's some wiggle room in there, if, you know, everybody can't meet at every meeting. So we'll let you know every time, and that's why we put the schedule on the back of our email.
When we say schematic design at the end of July, what are we actually gonna be looking at? What are we gonna have?
Do you wanna take a swing?
Yeah, mostly what we are trying to establish at the conclusion, at the end of schematic design, if we door jobs properly, we have the right input, is that we have the general sizes of spaces, where their adjacencies, making sure all the spaces are where they need to be in a footprint, a general mass of the building, so floor plans, elevations. It's still at a schematic level, so.
Will we see graphics of exterior or anything like that at that point, or does that come later?
Yeah, typically, we have the best renderings at the end of design development, but I think it's important for us to be able to communicate what the building looks like at that stage as well, because we need to make sure that as we're having these meetings, we're getting right track, wrong track, picking up any comments for the appearance of buildings, where they're positioned on the site access, site circulation, and more or less nailing the sizes of the spaces and where they are within the footprint.
And this group will have some input every couple of weeks when you meet with us,
Yes.
so that it won't just be at the end of July, here's what we've developed.
Correct. So what we will do, so we'll have this kind of 1-2 pager summarizing our activities. There will typically be a number of attachments that are part of it. So when we're earlier in a project, we typically will put site plans, floor plans in, say, a PowerPoint slide in case we need to throw it on a screen and kind of click through them. So there won't be drawings that look technical in nature, like on a title block and everything. We'll try and make it an appropriate presentation for this committee.
Do you guys do, you guys do VR walkthroughs?
Yeah, everything is built in Revit, as you all know.
I mean, do you have the,
We can.
I'm just curious if you, I'm not saying to do it or not,
Yep.
I've done that and it was kinda cool. You actually put it on,
I've never done,
and you walk through almost like a video game and.
I've seen that on TV with, people doing it, but
We've certainly used that in the past. We use a program called Enscape, which is fully integrated with Revit, and we use it more and more as a design tool, as a coordination tool. Once we start getting all of the other models, all the consultant models in, it's a great tool to understand third-dimensionally how to coordinate. But that also informs design, so we'd be happy to, in past meetings, we would bring our model, flip it around. We could set up the VR if you'd like.
I was just curious if that was part of your,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to add steps to the process by any means, I was just curious.
It's one way to communicate visually, and yeah, we're certainly, it's there for the taking if that's something that we want to start looking at. Yeah. So one just minor comment, what we'll do after hearing these comments, we kind of mapped out all our working group sessions. What we'll do is we'll try to outline for the building committee meetings that you have, kind of what's to come for us, so that you guys don't walk in cold, you kind of know generally what the topics are.
that would be helpful. I send out agendas the week before the meeting.
Yeah.
So if there's anything you want as an attachment,
I think that's a good way to.
that would,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
if you give that to me, I can attach that along with the agenda.
Yeah, we talked about that. We'll do that. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? All right, very good. Good start.
Thank you.
Selection of owner's rep. I'm gonna run through the process a little bit, not so much for you, but for the television and for people that do watch this. And I was surprised when we went through with the architects, people did pay attention to that. So I think it's important. We're at the point now where we are, I think, ready to make a recommendation for an owner's rep. And that process has been one that's been going on for several weeks now. We started by sending an RFQ out, requests for qualifications. We went through those booklets, the members of this committee read through all that information, evaluated it, and chose 3 different firms. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
do you want
fine.
us to stick around, or do you want us to?
No, it's up to you. You're welcome to stay, but you know, I also know that you have other things to be doing.
Well, I'm sure these guys would like to sit at the table, so maybe we'll hear.
All right, so long now.
Yeah.
And from that RFQ, we chose 3 different firms that we wanted to pursue further. Sent out an RFP, request for proposals, to those 3 different firms. We read through that information, we called references, and we invited them in for presentations and interviews yesterday. From that process, we asked each of the committee members to take a look at all the information that they had and to evaluate them, looking at references, phase management, schedule management, cost management, chemistry with the project manager, and an overall impression. And that data, that information was gathered individually from each person, put together by Chuck, and that information was then compiled. We then opened up all of the cost estimates. The data that I just mentioned was worth 65% of the evaluation. When we opened up the cost estimates and we plugged that in, that was worth 35% of the information. What we get from that process, and if Chuck wants to take a couple seconds to just talk about the meaning of these numbers, this is sort of the end result of that process. Chuck?
Sure, so this is the weighted score, total combining the criteria evaluation, as Rich said, we're 65, plus the cost evaluation, we're 35, and it's broken down by how we receive proposals. So we received a cost proposal for just the Norton Elementary School project from each of the firms, for the North End School from each of them, and then a cost for both. So going school to school or looking at both, we come up with a best value score, for each of them, and we select accordingly. So.
And based on that, Arcadis was the firm that had the highest score.
Correct. Arcadis was the best value for each of these schools, including both schools combined, when we look at the price.
Any comments or questions at this point? If not, then do we have a,
Yes. I move to select and award a contract to, subject to the approval of the Cheshire Town Council, Arcadis US Inc. as the owner's rep services for the Norton Elementary School construction project, as detailed in the submitted fee proposal in response to RFP 2223-23.
do we have a second? Second, any discussion? Then all those in favor? Unanimous?
All right. I also move to select and award a contract to, subject to the approval of the Cheshire Town Council, Arcadis US Inc. as the owner's representative services for the new North End Elementary School construction project, as detailed in the submitted fee proposal in response to RFP number 2223-24.
Seconded? Any discussion? And all those in favor? And that's it, unanimous. Okay. I would just like to say that I was very excited by Arcadis' presentation, and I think they're going to be a wonderful addition to our team. So that will, as is stated in this, we will bring that to the town council. Their meeting is the second week of May, so it's a few weeks from now. And in fact, if all goes according to plan, we may be bringing both the owner's rep and the CM at risk to the town council at that same time. And then, I like to say we would be fully staffed, but I know that Jeff will say, no, we got a whole list of other people to hire.
We got a whole other list for you.
Do those go through the same process?
They all have to go through the RFQ, RFP process, but it's a much more abbreviated process because there's so few respondents for most of these things. And typically you don't do interviews. You may interview the commissioning agent, you know, but for things like, you know, third-party review and special tests, special inspections and independent materials testing, it doesn't make any sense to do an interview. You can if you want, but most building committees don't.
Is it appropriate to do a subcommittee for interviewing?
You could.
Okay,
Sure.
I mean, that's just an option for
Yeah,
us.
sure. If it's something that you feel is important,
If we had, you know, more than one that was going, instead of having everybody have to go through all of the material, if we had a subcommittee that then recommended it to the whole group, I don't know, we'll see as we get into it.
yeah, the commissioning agent would really be next.
Sustainable workshop report, Megan has very nicely said that she would be willing to put that off,
Yes.
so you're not,
Not
Going to do
the
that
end
this
of the
evening.
semester.
so we will know, you will let me know
Yes, I will let you know.
when you are ready for that.
I have about a 3-week period in between classes, so
Okay.
taking a summer class.
I don't want to
too.
burn you out on that, that was something you had
Yeah.
said you wanted
I
to share,
do.
so whenever you're ready. Any new business or items for future agendas? Nothing that we want to add? And if that is the
Rich,
case,
Rich,
oh,
do we, what you had mentioned before, do we wanna put a line item on the agenda? And I'm asking, I'm not suggesting, but something that says, you know, schedule, or something, a discussion of the schedule, or how we are on it?
I
or-
can add it under the architect's report, but yeah, at this point, that's the architect, but it'll become more than the architect as we go. Yeah, I have no problem with doing
Because
that.
I'm just, I mean, from day one, I've been thinking we're like, before the first meeting, it's just, you know,
Well,
everything, I don't get this much time, so for me, it's, it always
the
feels. like-
nature of these projects, you really have to spend the time on the design, and as an ex-principal who built a school, this is the most important part for the educators, as they're really diving in and looking at how this building will
If you
function.
look
It's
at
not
the
just
design
put an
schedule,
office building and they will come.
aside from the fact that
It's
it's too much
making sure
time,
that if I've got a media
it
specialist, I've
doesn't
got a
work.
PE
In
teacher,
other
I've
words,
got a
if
music
you,
teacher,
if you anticipate
that
an
those
18
facilities
month
are working,
active
the bus
construction
routes in and
phase,
out work
then
properly, all that
18
sort of
months
stuff.
design,
Taking
that's
time now will
36
save you lots of
months,
headaches
3
down the
years.
line.
Yeah, and the reason I asked them
Much
what I do
time.
is just because you miss one of those hiccups now, it really does cascade, because it pushes everything out.
It can.
And that's,
Because you build
It
in
can't. The
bidding
building that I
phase
built
of
was
2
supposed to have
months,
been done in June.
and that takes you
We
like
had to
June
delay
of
school by a week.
27.
We couldn't quite get in on time, we delayed school 1 week,
So,
and we had to make
So
that
you're
time
thinking
up
it's
in
Oh, in
April
the summer.
vacation.
I'm
No, we
thinking
did an
that
April vacation.
Oh, it's better.
Everyone else got April
construction
vacation.
managers last night.
But, you know, that's what happened.
They
But
had
we
a
were,
shorter
we were
design
running
phase.
6 and 7 day
And
weeks,
so we'll see
particularly
now,
the Masons,
Because 18
because
months, you know,
that
first
was
18
the
months
big
for
holdup
designing
for
an
us.
elementary school,
And, you
You
know,
know, so you
we
can
were going
probably
down
not
there with bagels on Saturdays and,
a month,
you
a
know,
month and a
encouraging
half off
the Masons, don't stop
PE.
working with the bagels. So when we get to that point,
Once
you
we
know,
have the owners
see
rep
what
and the
happens.
CM on board, they can.
I don't want
Patch
us
it out, you know.
to not hit our deadline. We are in a good position in that the students are in schools now. It's getting overcrowded, but we really want to get it open on time. But, you know, we'll see what happens. There's a lot of potential issues that could come up down the line in terms of supplies and materials, things like that. That's why, as we talk to the architects, we talk to the owner's rep, hopefully they're very proactive on those kinds of issues that will keep us on schedule. And from what everyone has told me, the schedule is a doable one. We'll see. Any other issues?
I just wanted to take a second to thank Chuck for, again, doing a wonderful job with the numbers. It was, like, it's been such a big help to have these really orderly graphs, so thank you.
It really has, and, yes. Well, the whole process just been very professional. I don't know what the state will say down the line. I hope they will look and say, wow, this is impressive. We've got at least one more to go, so.
I'll see this first.
And we
You
need
never
to, you know, we need to
compromise.
take a look at that, make sure the CM piece is in place, and that we get that out to people too, so. And those will be coming in next week, I think, you get your little booklets.
Do we have,
No, let's- go ahead.
I was just saying, do we know what the voting criteria is?
Feel free, send me input.
Sure, okay.
Because we don't have a meeting before.
I usually just look at the RFP and kind of pull out like the topics and everything, and it usually matches up pretty well with the tabs.
You kind of have to do that because the statute 10287 says that you have to consider at a minimum the following criteria, and they're the criteria that are in the RFP.
So we'll
Well,
just
there you
keep it
go.
the same.
Yeah.
and run through.
You can consider other things, but at a minimum, you have to consider what's in there.
So the
There were
RFP
12.
material is coming in next Wednesday. Once again, we don't have a meeting, so you'll have to pick it up. Or if somebody can't get there, let me pick it up and deliver it. And then we have interviews scheduled for the 25th, 26th, and a meeting on the 27th.
So Jeff, is there anything about the weighting of the different categories that, or does the statute say that, you know, every single thing that's in there, those different categories is all the same? But then
It's up
at
to
the
you
end,
to decide the weighting.
We can do that, okay.
Yeah.
So we don't have another meeting before then, so that's gonna be something we'll have to.
Yeah, I'll shoot it on this.
Yeah, we may wanna just, maybe as a group email discussion, just to see what things we wanna add, if we can.
Well, remember, no
Yeah,
email
yeah.
meetings.
Yeah, that's a
FOIA.
problem.
No email
That's a
meetings.
problem, yeah. I mean, I could set up a Zoom meeting if we need to, or we can just schedule a meeting for next week, one agenda item.
I'll put it together off of what's in the RFP and, you know, just throw out weights, and then let's meet like a half hour before the
Yeah,
interviews
and
again.
and if anybody has any ideas, we'll just send you an email, and you can discuss with Chuck and whether or not
We
it
can
goes
do
on.
that. We just
That's
can't-
fine.
Yeah, we can't go back and forth on.
Yeah. The other thing is, I like to print out my own little, you know, it helps me be prepared, so I mean, if we can't before the meeting, that's fine. But
But as I said, if Chuck sends his thing out and we feel we need more conversation, we can do a short meeting on next Thursday. We don't have a meeting scheduled right now. It would probably be no more than about half an hour or so. And that would, so let me know, I need to post meetings 48 hours, is it?
24.
24.
Unless it's virtual, then I think it's 48.
Okay. So if we do decide we're gonna have a meeting, not, but otherwise you're gonna go 2 weeks without seeing each other. On that happy note, do I have a motion to adjourn? Nobody?
Did you say
We can sit here, that's all right. Do we have a second?
Sure.
No, tomorrow
That is-
is
okay.
the date we
All those
can
in favor
default
of
meeting.
adjournment? All right.